Don't turn it off just yet. Just let it. Keep going. You're doing good. You're doing good.
And the episode that we did about 10 years ago, you mentioned your daughters being, I think you said 15 and 11.
15 and 11.
And I was like, you're a granddaddy.
26 and Gloria just sent this to me.
Freaking daddy.
Yes.
10 years.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Man, I love it.
What are you telling young folks based on the question of the things that were said to you when you were thinking about being a journalist?
One, I would like to point out that we were forewarned. We
tried to tell you.
We tried to tell y'all. And if you did not get this in the first Trump administration,
Welcome to Left of Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We are joined today by Professor Meredith D. Clark, Associate Professor of Race and Political Communication at the Hussman School of Journalism and Media at UNC Chapel Hill, and we won't hold that against her. She's the author of We Tried to Tell Y'all, Black Twitter and the Rise of Digital Counter-Narratives, published this year by Oxford University Press. How are you doing today, Professor Clark?
I'm yet holding on, Dr. Neal. Thank you for having me.
I feel as though you've been writing this book since I've known you.
Yes.
Which probably goes back at least a decade.
Yes. This was my dissertation project, and being a student who was only the second in my family to go to college, and my mother was an MD, so she wasn't quite as much help when it came to the PhD stuff. I never dreamed about writing a book, not when I enrolled in school, not even on the day of my defense. But one of my committee members mentioned it to me, and then once I had the idea, I really wanted to pursue it, even though I was structurally discouraged in a couple of places. And then a lot of things changed along the way. I even remember completing one version of the manuscript and then finding out that Twitter was going to be purchased by Elon Musk, which prompted a complete revision.
I can imagine that when you started this work or when you started your graduate career, the last thing you thought about is that you would write a book on Twitter, let alone Black Twitter.
Absolutely not. I came to UNC actually to study digital ethnography of newsrooms. So I wanted to know about newsroom culture in digital spaces like at BuzzFeed or these other places that didn't have a legacy presence. But the Black Twitter research was something I kind of stuck in my back pocket because I had seen Black Twitter being covered in ways that I thought weren't accurate or reflective of the culture.
You describe yourself as a recovering journalist. Yes. Talk a little bit about your journalistic career before you move into the academy.
Absolutely. So I actually pursued journalism as my master's degree. Again, second in the family to go to college. I was told I wouldn't make any money in journalism, so I started out in political science, which has helped along the way. Yeah. But I started working at the local newspaper, the Tallahassee Democrat, and the summer before I graduated, I had picked up the paper because my parents didn't subscribe to it, flipped it over, and I saw this note from the Herald Leader that said, "It's come to our attention that the Herald Leader neglected to cover the civil rights movement. The editor regrets the omission." And that admission really informed my journalism career. So from working with the Black press in Tallahassee to moving on to the Tallahassee Democrat to even working here at the Raleigh News and Observer, I've always been interested in making sure that Black stories, particularly in news media, are told accurately and fairly and represent the breadth of what Black culture is.
Let's talk about this title. We tried to tell y'all, and it's hard to not hear this title in this moment and think that you came up with it shortly after the November elections as a kind of response to how Black women in particular, responded to the 2024 election. But the title actually goes back much longer.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one, it's a colloquialism within Black communities.
Yeah.
You know, I try to tell you, we try to tell y'all, but Clint Wilson actually tweeted this and said it as an African-American proverb. And it was funny because before that, there was a session that I had at South by Southwest, and I was looking for a title for the session, and this popped into my mind because I was thinking about all of the things that Black Twitter has tried to tell folks outside of Black Twitter. And so I guess the gift of this title is that it is evergreen. There is always going to be a lesson that folks did not listen to Black people about. So 20, 30 years from now, my title will still have relevance.
This seems like a strange question that anyone in 2025 wouldn't know what Black Twitter is. But what is Black Twitter?
All right, so I have described Black Twitter as a culturally linked network of Black folks using Twitter to talk about issues of concern to Black communities. But the shorter version is that Black Twitter is really Black people on Twitter going about our everyday lives and business. But being on this social networking platform made Black business a lot more visible to people who otherwise wouldn't necessarily engage us in conversation or listen to the way that we talk about ourselves and our communities and our concerns.
How embedded were you in Twitter?
Hugely, hugely. From my journalism days when I first started using Twitter, I was the youngest member of the editorial board at the Tallahassee Democrat. I think my coworkers were somewhere between 15 to 25 years older than I was. And so I brought that to our editorial board meetings. And I remember at night, you know, I would watch what was happening on Twitter with Black Twitter in specific. And we'd be there on Black Twitter after dark, you know, watching things go down.
Wow, that seems like such a long time ago.
It was a different time. It was a completely different time. But I was there every single day up until the day I got locked out of my account about 2 to 3 years ago.
Talk about that, if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So my handle was at Meredith D. Clark, which is what I am across platforms for consistency. And Twitter had imposed two-factor authentication. I did that. Something went wrong with the two-factor authentication right around the time the platform was purchased by Elon Musk. And in the firing of all the engineers and the support staff, I was never able to get in touch with anyone to get back into the account. Although last year I saw that someone had logged into my account from Belarus. So I used my new account at Surly Chisholm to let people know that if they see something funny coming from my account, it's not me, it's someone else.
Talk a little bit about that moment. There are a lot of pushback, obviously, because Musk is Musk. And folks leaving the platform for that reason. But how much was that huge departure of Black thinkers and journalists and creatives, how much was it that they left the space because in this new regime, the thing was just broke?
Yeah, it's absolutely dysfunctional. And one of the quotes that sticks out in my mind actually comes from a podcast called Gaslit Nation. So Andrea Chalupa and Sarah Kendzior were doing this podcast, and they said about Elon Musk's purchase that you do not cede territory in an information war. And it really reframed my thinking about what Twitter was and what it meant for him to buy it. Because now, if you go on Twitter, it's impossible to find the people that you were connected with. The timeline is flooded with complete junk ads, junk posts. And I think that's really intentional. You saw how effective people were using this platform for organizing, for educating one another. If you want to shut down a communicative process that is uniting people, then you upend the platform that they're using to connect.
Give me 3 moments in your research and being on Twitter where it really struck you how powerful the platform was, right? Particularly through a Black framework.
Absolutely. So the first was actually the night that Troy Davis was executed.
This is Troy Anthony Davis, and I've been sitting on Georgia's death row for 16 years for a crime I did not commit.
The protest did not work. This morning, the State Board of Pardons rejected clemency for Troy Davis.
Ebenezer Baptist Church pastor Reverend Raphael Warnock said there is just too much doubt in this case to execute Troy Davis. A jury convicted Davis nearly 20 years ago for murder of off-duty Savannah police officer Mark M.F.A. But since then, several witnesses have recanted their story, and the courts have postponed the execution 3 different times.
The board has considered the totality of the information presented in this case and thoroughly deliberated on it, after which the decision was to deny clemency.
I was still in school here at UNC, and that moment of collective mourning and collective grieving, I think informed a lot of people about prison abolition, about having an abolitionist mindset, and got more people to think about what they could be doing in that world and in that frame. The second is probably going to be the day that someone at Yahoo News mistyped a bigger Navy, because that was quite a time. So someone transposed the B and the N, and you know, Black people, nothing is too serious or sacred for us. So we had jokes for days.
Yeah.
That was a great time. And then I would say in between the two, I think the weekend before I defended my dissertation, I was sitting there behind my computer and I saw hashtags about Ferguson and Mike Brown go by. And that was the day that Mike Brown had been killed in Ferguson, Missouri, by a police officer, and seeing what happened in terms of people really feeling empowered to come out, to speak out, to organize, really just overwhelmed me with how powerful connection could be through a platform.
There are very few spaces in American society that aren't toxic to Black women. Can you talk a little bit about that toxicity directed at Black women, particularly in the last 5 or 6 years of social media, but being directed at Black women by Black men in ways that are just really striking? I mean, I'm struck by the fact I had a conversation with our colleague, Natalie Bullock-Brown, yesterday, and you know, we're in a moment now in 2025 where there are far more young Black men who are more progressive in their gender politics, right? You know, than they would have been 20
years ago.
or 50 years ago, right? But it seems with this emergence comes an even deeper investment from someplace else of Black men who use social media specifically to target Black women.
Yeah, I think it's a really nuanced and what we would call a wicked problem, right? There's always been misogynoir within Black communities. What we have on the platform is the ability for it to be amplified and networked, so more people can participate in this harassment. But you see it in the launching of careers as influencers with someone like Kevin Samuels, right? You see it in the everyday harassment of Black women, tweeting about anything on social media platforms, talking about anything. There's someone in Black women's business putting us down, telling us who we are, who we aren't, what have you. But I think what was most potent to me in studying this and thinking about what Black women face in social media spaces is realizing that foreign agents used the divides between Black men and Black women to start to seed some of the division that ultimately influenced the outcome of the 2016 election. If that doesn't tell you about how powerful the relationships and the bond between Black women and Black men are, and what it means for Black men to use this platform to harass Black women, I don't know what else to tell you. It's internationally known, you know, that this is a fraught space.
This episode of Left of Black that you're appearing on is being co-produced by students in my class.
Yes.
The class started the very first day with me asking them how they got news. Virtually everyone said via Twitter, via TikTok. Yeah. And one student admitted that she did read newspapers, usually online. I say all that to say, how do you feel about the state of journalism and Black journalism in particular? You know, with everyone pulling back in November and even before then, but some of the editorial choices that were made by the Los Angeles Times, the owner of the Los Angeles Times, the owner of the Washington Post, folks were pulling back, Black folks are pulling back subscriptions, things like that. And there's always a question that where do you go for a black source that's news? And we're old enough to remember where the root
Yes, yes.
was someplace you went to get information, right?
Yes.
It hasn't been that.
It's more entertainment focused now.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
as are so many of the platforms, right? So how do you feel about the state of black journalism now?
Wow. Well, I honestly look upon this moment with hope, with optimism. And that is because, and this is a question that you asked me years and years and years ago on the show, where are black people going after Black Twitter? And I said, Black channels. We are going to spaces where we know we can connect with one another that may not be as out there as a social networking platform. So I feel hopeful because in the vacuum and the void of corporate journalism, which has always been a problem for Black folks, just like I said with the Lexington Herald Leader not covering the civil rights movement. We've always been failed by journalism in this country, but we have also always produced our own narratives and news, and that's central to the book. So we're going back to producing our own news, which is something that people turn to when they go to these platforms like TikTok, because they feel that they can trust folks that they connect with there. They have those relationships. We are strengthening the institutions that we use to create news. So sites like Capital B, Afro LA, the Bay State Banner, which is a legacy, a history in Boston, right? We're going back to those and returning and giving them our attention and hopefully our dollars. So I am, concerned about journalism as a whole in the sense that I think, like the rest of the country, this is white supremacy's last stand in journalism. But for Black journalism, I feel particularly optimistic about what we create because there's no pressure like the pressure Black folks have faced to survive and thrive in spite of adversity. And that's where we are in this moment.
To go back to that question that I asked, more than a decade ago, where are Black folks going now with Twitter becoming X, with some of the other even Black-owned sites not quite delivering on what we hoped that they would?
Well, I think people are going back to one another. Old media theory talks about opinion leadership and how there's someone in the community who is going to be doing that reading and engaging with channels that perhaps a number of folks have said, I'm done with. But there are also the friends who are doing the deep reading in books and in papers and academic papers. They're going to conferences. They're sitting around the table with one another and exchanging news and information. We're also looking outside of this country. We're reminded that the United States is not a nation unto itself. It is part of the larger world. So we're looking to our folks on the continent. But again, we are also going to our own publications. And where we're not finding news that meets our needs, we're starting those. I'm proud to be part of an initiative on the West Coast, Afro LA, which was started by a journalist, Dana Amiher, and she recognized the vacuum that needed to be filled for Black news in LA, and she's addressing it, and mostly on social platforms.
What's the response been to the book so far?
The response, I guess, has been good, because I tell you, I can't really measure it the way that I thought I might. I thought I might be able to measure it on Twitter. I figured after the book came out and it was announced I'd get dragged on Twitter, and maybe that's the silver lining of the platform not being functional. I don't know. I'm very pleased to see how it was received and reviewed by Jenna Wortham in the New York Times. They were wonderful and deliberate about the review, and I had some hesitations about the Times reviewing it, but they did an excellent job. I'm hearing from my colleagues and from students, and I think that's what's most important to me, that where there are students who want to do work on Black digital culture, they're finding a foundation and something to cite in the book.
What's next for you?
That's the question. The moment I am thinking about the past, actually. The present is kind of hard to withstand right now. And I'm finding comfort in the archives, in looking where Black folks have been creating and telling our stories at HBCUs. I am very interested in how we have covered news for ourselves in this space that is in between and has the tension of students being trained for mainstream media jobs, which emphasizes this view from nowhere, which is very white, male, middle class. But then being trained at HBCUs that have this mission of racial uplift, of racial pride, and of community and advocacy. So what does our news look like there?
What are you telling young folks based on the question of the things that were said to you when you were thinking about being a journalist? How would you encourage young Black folks, young folks of color, to go into journalism at this period of time, right? You know, it's a different world, right? You know, there's a world once when folks were making $4 or $5 a word and could live a life writing 5-6 pieces a year. There's a world where you could guarantee that you'd have 3,000 words someplace. Right now, it's like, say what you need to say in 450, and we're going to pay you 30 cents a word for that. Why would you encourage young folks to go into journalism now?
Well, the thing that I say to all of my students is that journalism is often a gateway career. If you can learn how to tell stories and to parse information, to do the research, to dig in and ask questions, that opens up a whole world to you that you don't necessarily have to stay in journalism if you start in journalism. However, if you want to pursue it as a career, you do it for the same reason that journalists everywhere have always done it. And that is to make sure that people's stories are told accurately and fairly by someone who understands the larger frame of the stories that they're trying to tell. You're never going to be rich being a journalist. Like, yes, maybe some people were making $4 or $5 a word, but they are the corollary of the 1% in the larger population, right? We know how to hustle. And if this is something that you want to do, you can hustle your way into being an editor. You could be a book publisher. You could own your own podcasting network. These are all things that Black folks have done in and through journalism. But I would encourage folks to be a part of that long, long legacy that goes back to Freedom's Journal with the founding of the first Black newspaper published in this country by free Black men, and tell our stories, to take the time to tell our stories.
I don't think it's adequate to describe the leadership in this country now as an administration. It's a regime.
Indeed.
How do you feel about the state of journalists, the safety of journalists, and the state of journalism and the future of journalism under the current regime?
So in this current regime, one, I would like to point out that we were forewarned.
We tried to tell y'all.
We tried to tell y'all. And if you did not get this in the first Trump administration and the first Trump regime, I would say the first one was probably an administration, this one is definitely a regime. If you did not get it then you definitely get it now. And it's a wake-up call because the U.S. for so long has been at the top or close to the top of lists about press freedom. We've never been quite number one, maybe not even in the top 5, but we've had this false sense of security about the First Amendment and its applications. Now, one, Black folks could always tell you that the First Amendment for so long, and maybe even now, didn't apply to us. We didn't necessarily have the right to assemble, to petition, to speak to the press, to worship the way that we wanted to worship, right? We can always tell you about those limitations. But now everyone is beginning to see how fragile the First Amendment is. And that's a different conversation than the state of journalism, because journalism in the United States is a corporate function. It is something that looks for profit. It has stakeholders, and we've seen that at the detriment of society and the contribution that journalism is supposed to make to liberal democracy. So I'm worried from that sense. I'm not comforted by the fact that people are having this wake-up call, but I hope that we are encouraged to be radicalized in this moment and to commit acts of actual journalism.
So I have this question for you. When you wake up in the morning, where do you go for your news and information?
Oh man, you want me to tell you I'm in the same space as your students? Truth be told, I go to my group chats because as I mentioned earlier,
professional group chats.
Professional group, but they're also the fun group chats because there's not necessarily this divide. Like, we talk about the very serious things in these spaces where we're just trying to have fun too. So yes, I've got a couple of professor group chats where we're in the same field or we're in interlinking fields, and people will have put in articles or updates from their campuses overnight or first thing in the morning. And I look at those first because it's a nice entry point into the regular headlines. From there, I usually do still go to a couple of news sites. My ones of choice were the New York Times and the Washington Post. I have canceled my subscription to both of those. I go to the Lexington Herald Leader. I want the owners and publishers to understand that when my subscriptions, through the digital platforms, you're paid up for a certain amount of time. When they end, they're done. I'm not coming back. I go to my hometown paper to see what's happening in my hometown. My mother still lives there, so I want to know. I go back to the Tallahassee Democrat. I lived in Tallahassee for 12 years, went to school there, worked for that paper. I want to know what's happening there. It's a state capital, and Florida man's always got some good news. Yeah. I go to YouTube. And see what some of the reaction is to the events of the day. And honestly, I go to the White House website to see what sort of foolery we're going to be dealing with today.
Let me ask you this last question. We were part of a group trip to Cuba.
Yes.
A few years ago.
Yes.
And what was so striking about Cuba, besides the food,
yes.
Can't let that go.
Cost me my wedding ring, yes.
Oh, wow.
It fell off. Yep.
But the fact that they don't have a digital infrastructure, how difficult it was to find Wi-Fi. If our own digital infrastructure falls apart, right? And I joke with my students like this all the time. It's like, if the cloud disappears, what y'all gonna listen to? Because y'all ain't bought a physical record or album or cassette ever in your life.
Yeah.
How do we function in terms of an information society if the event comes that the cloud crashes and we no longer have access to that data?
Well, the beautiful thing is that with all of this evolution in media technology, that none of those media technologies ever truly die. We still have broadband radio access. We still have over the airwaves television, right? We still have print media. And so we're still going to be able to get information. It's just not going to be at the speed of our fingertips as it was once before, right? So we're going to be able to do that. The concern there is who owns those channels. And the contraction that we've seen in terms of public media and the outright assault that we're seeing just as late as yesterday, where the White House is now saying that Congress should defund NPR and PBS. So we have those concerns, but there's still media that's being made. And I do think one of the places that we'll be able to see some invention with that is in something as simple as text messages. Because even though I can't get, and I know you said if the digital infrastructure goes down, but we can still SMS. There's still ways to get those messages across. But I'd be able to share with you something from my region of the country, even if it's not something that I could get digitally or from a local physical media producer. And that is a way that we're going to be able to continue to share information.
We've been joined today by Professor Meredith D. Clark, who's Associate Professor of Race and Political Communication at the UNC Houseman School of Journalism and Media. And again, we're not going to hold that against her.
Thank you. Thank you.
The book is We Tried to Tell Y'all, Black Twitter and the Rise of Digital Counter-Narratives, published by Oxford University Press, 2025. Thank you for joining us today, Professor Clark.
Thank you for having me.
And you clap. Hey, you clap.
Blacks, they be hyping, I'm the light that lit your match. A black watch for all the times I watch MTV raps. Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts. And every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black, everything black. Culture over everything, y'all, we taking it back. Black.
tell my husband that I kept my quips to myself and behaved.